Hello and welcome to ATP Report. I'm Barry Nussbaum. I'd like to remind all of you in ATP land, remember you can sign up for our email list directly simply by going to findbarry.com. Findbarry.com, it'll take you to the ATP landing page. You can sign up for all of our content like today's stuff and everything else from our special guest today, absolutely for free, and you'll get it in your email on a regular basis, which is now the time to bring in our favorite guest on ATP Report, Robert Spencer. You know him as the author of over 24 best-selling books on Islam and jihad around the world. He's the founder and editor of Jihad Watch. He is the expert on what's going on with insurgencies around the world. Welcome, Robert Spencer.
Always good to talk to you, Barry. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on with us today. So President Biden's nominee for the Supreme Court has a history of representing terror suspects. When she was a federal public defender in Washington, she went well beyond the bare bones defense to attack the United States government and some of its counterterrorism policies. She claimed that we, the United States, was violating the Geneva Convention in regards to her client's rights at Gitmo. She represented some detainees who challenged even being imprisoned. And I wonder if those views have stayed with her. Now, by way of background, I have a good friend who was a Marine major at Gitmo. She was in charge of one of the wing's security. She said her prisoners lived in better conditions and ate better food than her Marines. In your opinion, Robert, can Judge Jackson be impartial in regards to these terror undesirables when she sits on the Supreme Court, if that should happen?
Well, in the first place, Barry, she's never retracted or expressed any regret for anything that she did in those days. And so we have every reason to believe that she still thinks that the American government is committing atrocities in Guantánamo and that these people are being deprived of their human rights and so on. It's a standard leftist myth, but it is a myth. The Guantánamo supposed concentration camp is the only place where the prisoners actually gain weight while they're there. And there's no mistreatment of them, not even remotely. So it's just an unfortunate indication that Ms. Jackson is a standard leftist with anti-American views, just the sort of person we don't need on the Supreme Court. But the left is increasingly anti-American. Biden is beholden to the far left and his party. And so we're getting an anti-American Supreme Court justice.
Sure seems to be. My friend, the major, said she wished her troops got food as good as her prisoners got. They ate K rations, and the prisoners had a chef for each wing on a daily basis for 3 meals a day. She wanted that food, and she wasn't allowed to give it to her own troops.
I'm not surprised.
No kidding. So Israel has just experienced their third multiple murder terror attack in a week, and these are attacks inside of Israel. Palestinian terror groups are praising the daily shooting attacks, including the one at Bnei Brak that left 5 Israelis dead. This is just outside of Tel Aviv, and Palestinians are celebrating like crazy all over Palestinian media. Hamas is telling their followers this is the harbinger of our people's operation to come deep inside the Zionist entity, meaning inside Israel. Islamic Jihad, the same thing, showing Palestinian men jumping up and down, shouting slogans to destroy Israel. And the world is quiet, Robert. What can be done to get the truth out about these multiple murders and why they're being committed?
Well, the media just doesn't want this kind of thing to be reported, because we have to understand, and I think altogether too many people still don't understand, that the media is not a news source at this point. It's a propaganda arm for the far left, and they have a narrative. And just as we discussed in other contexts before, they have a narrative about Israel, that Israel is an oppressive apartheid state and the Palestinians are the poor oppressed victims. And so when Palestinians act against Israeli civilians and murder Israeli civilians, it doesn't fit the narrative, it doesn't get reported. Because what the jihadis apparently want to do is actually shore up that narrative. Israel has been increasing the number of Palestinians allowed to work in Israel. This was never restricted before and only got to be restricted in the first place because of jihad terror attacks like these. And then Israel began relaxing a lot of these restrictions. Now, probably they will be put back, and that will reinforce the media narrative. We'll hear a lot about that and about this supposed oppression and apartheid. But all it is really is Israel trying to defend itself against this relentless jihad.
Well said. I got to ask you these two questions because for the life of me, I don't know the answer, and maybe you do. Judge Jackson, who we've discussed before, is going through hearings, probably on her way to a confirmation to the Supreme Court. And she's had two impossible answers to give, at least from her perspective. The senators that asked the questions expected an answer, and astoundingly, Judge Jackson couldn't answer either one of them. The first one came from Senator Kennedy when he asked her, when do the equal protection laws attach to a human being? I mean, that's a reasonable thing to ask. Obviously, he was inquiring about her thoughts on abortion. And Judge Jackson said, I got to read you the quote word for word. Quote, well, Senator, I believe the Supreme Court, I actually don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry, I don't. In other words, I don't know when a baby is a human being or not. She has no idea. Now, this was on top of the craziest answer I've ever heard, where the other day she was asked, could she please supply a simple definition on the difference between a man and a woman? What is a woman? And she said, I don't know. I'm not a biologist. Now, the good news with her answer is there's now 1,000 memes out on the internet. One is funnier than the other, but it's rather terrifying that a Supreme Court justice can't tell you what's a woman and what's a man and what's she going to do when cases come to her regarding equal protection under the law for men and women. Is it really going to be like this if she's on the bench?
I'll tell you exactly what she's going to do. Once she is on the Supreme Court, she will rule in favor of the most radical pro-abortion measures, and she will rule in favor of all kinds of transgender initiatives and anything that actually undermines the obvious and natural difference between men and women. She knows very well the answer to both questions, but she's beholden to her far left base, which is at war with reality on both issues. And so consequently, she can't say anything about it. But we really know, the whole world knows where she's going to come down on these issues. And this is, once again, indication of somebody that we really don't need on the court, somebody who is not going to have the best interests of Americans at heart.
It was shocking to watch the answer. I thought it was a joke until I watched the tape. And a whole lot of people are very distressed, Robert. For years, the Palestinian Authority has been criticized by the European Union for continuing to use textbooks that are viciously anti-Semitic, very violent, and call for the death of the Jews. Now, these are school children reading these textbooks. And the European Union said, we're going to stop funding you if you don't take out the let's kill Jews passages in your school books. And for decades, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, has been promised to do it. Well, finally, after decades, Robert, as you reported on Jihad Watch, the EU finally stepped in and said, okay, we're going to call back 200 million euros that we're going to you because you just won't remove the kill all the Jews from your books. And of course, the Palestinian Authority flipped out. Do you think the money will buy the change the Europeans want?
It well could, although it's certain that if it did, it would be a cosmetic change that would be reversed once again as soon as the EU's attention was elsewhere. Because the virulently anti-Semitic passages in the Palestinian textbooks are based straight on Islamic theology, on the Quran, on the example of Muhammad, and on 1400 years of Islamic anti-Semitism. The idea that the Jews could be allowed a state is contrary to the Quran saying that the Jews are the worst enemies of the Muslims, chapter 5, verse 82, that they are under the curse of Allah, chapter 9, verse 30. So many other passages that are so anti-Semitic in the Quran. Above all, also the imperative to drive them out from where they drove you out, which is chapter 2, verse 191. The Jews did not drive the Arabs out of Israel, but it is the Palestinian Arab historical myth that they did. And consequently, they have this divine command to drive out the Jews. They're going to pursue this whatever the EU does. But there's no doubt that the EU decision stunned the Palestinian leadership, because they've been getting away with this sort of thing for years and nobody ever calls them to account. Trump was the first, and the EU was against him. And so now the EU is behaving the way Trump did, but probably they'll cave. And probably the Palestinians realize that they'll cave because they always have before.
Very wise of you to notice. And I would also add, as an addendum to what you just said, Robert, and Biden has reversed all of Trump's policies on withholding money because the Palestinians were supporting terror. And as you said in our last show, Biden is expressly violating the Taylor Force Act, giving them money that he knows is going to be used for terror. Shame on Biden. And you know what? Well done, EU. I hope you stick to your guns on this. Robert, where can people find out about you and follow your work?
I'm at jihadwatch.org, Barry, and also Jihad Watch RS on Twitter. My books are available for the most part at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and any self-respecting bookstore.
And as I say, every time Mr. Spencer joins us, read his stuff. You need to be educated, and he's the scholar to teach you about Islam. Trust us at ATP. So thanks for joining us today on ATP Report. We sure appreciate your attention and hope you will subscribe. It's always free. Our content is always delivered without cost. For ATP Report, I'm Barry Nussbaum.